This is the May 2nd, 2018 meeting of the Conservation Committee. I'm going to do roll call. Member Ann Raponi.
Here.
Member Joseph Laval.
Here.
And Member Robert Cassidy.
Here.
And I'm Nick Malaysian, Interim Chairman. Can I have a motion for approval of the minutes for April 4th, 2018?
I make a motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
Too late.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, item number 3, continued public hearing, notice of intent, DEP file 0610709, 327 Revere Beach Boulevard, demolition of existing structures and construction of mixed-use development consisting of 145 residential units and 2,500 square feet of resident retail with parking on grade. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Richard Bennett, Achara Development, 30 Railroad Street, Revere. How would you like these set up? So
We want to set up to whatever pictures you have to face that camera. So exactly how that easel is right there is how we want it to show.
Okay. And I'll let Roy introduce himself in a minute. He's the main attraction. I am a principal and also in-house counsel for Achara. Just to give a brief recap, you folks probably remember we came in on what at least we thought was the more involved issues on the site, which is the resource area delineation a couple months ago, and went through that. Mary Rimmer is here. Mary did the flagging, the wetlands. And if you have any questions, we already have our ORAD on that you folks gave us, and you more or less agreed with us, which we appreciated. But if you do have any questions or want to go back and ask questions or be refreshed or anything on the ORAD, Mary's here for and available for you. Roy is here from Engineering Alliance. Engineering Alliance is our primary project engineer. And as you might recall, before we came in and showed you a layout design for a building that we hoped we would be getting permitted, that again, Roy can walk you through what we ended up getting permitted. It's very similar to what we did show you before. I think we set the building back 7 feet or so off of the boulevard, and we also shrunk it a little bit, but more or less in general scheme and layout, it was as we had anticipated for a whole bunch of reasons, including the only real complexity we thought here was the resource area delineation. So we broke that out. We came to you folks first, went through that, and we're back. And with that, I'll turn it over to Roy so he can walk you through what we got permitted and then what he's done for stormwater management and so forth.
Great, thank you. Just name and address for the record, please.
My name is Roy Tiano, 11 Loomis Ave, Watertown, Mass. Basically, I work for Engineering Alliance in Saugus, and this is the existing conditions we currently have. The site, I have to use the mic.
Yeah, you can take that with you if you want.
Okay. The site is 1.1 acres, and basically it grades down from 14 at the higher elevation down to an 8 elevation at the back. There are currently 3 buildings on there, and what we intend to do is, I can show you the proposal. Are there any questions on the existing conditions?
Yes, would you just, for the audience, signify the 3 buildings that you're talking about that are there now?
Okay, the 3 buildings are at 326, 320, and what's the address here? I don't even have an address on that one. One of them is Bianchi, one of them is the taco place. So you're oriented to that? You know that one? Okay. Any other questions with the existing conditions?
No.
Like we were saying, the previous plan basically had the building right up to the property line, right up to the street, and there was a fair amount of landscaping, and when we did our original design, we put the infiltration units to the rear. Then when we moved everything back 7 feet, we basically changed the infiltration areas to the front, and we held the infiltration to the side, to both sides. But that's the major change with it. I mean, it's still the entrance drive coming into that location. Basically, you're entering at 14 on the garage and 4.5 on the lower level.
One more clip.
The revised plan is, like I say, very similar to the previous plan, and the only change being the 7-foot setback that we have. It's not a setback, it's basically just to accommodate more of a sidewalk area and to generate more easier flow. And we also have a sidewalk cafe for the retail, because it's a breakdown of retail, restaurant, and the number of units, 145 residential units. There's an aerial view of what we intend to do. And like I say, this one has the proper setbacks and so forth. With the infiltration on the side, we intend to use two 18-inch perforated pipes. We have 360 linear feet of perforated pipe at that location. And then we have another 160 linear feet of 36-inch perforated pipe to the front. Where the access drive goes down to the side, we have a trench drain at the bottom of that enters the lower garage, and that basically has its own little infiltration system. Haley and Aubrey did our original soil testing, and they were able to find 8 feet of fine to medium sand. So that was phenomenal as far as the drainage calcs. We were able to infiltrate very easily in all the locations. The 2 levels of a garage, let me show you that as well. There's a cross-section showing the 2 levels of the garage with the residence above it. What we have, the floor drains in the garage will basically tie into the sanitary, and we propose to put a new 12-inch sanitary tie into the 20-foot in the rear. We have grease traps to handle the restaurant, and we have gas traps to handle the floor drains as well in the garage. Sorry about that. I lost my. All right, put it on there. Yeah. All right, so as far as the, like I say, the access drive coming in, you have the higher elevation coming in at 14.5, and then you got the lower elevation coming in at 4.5, and that basically addresses all of the access points that we have going into the garage. The infiltration, we split the roof in half goes to this side, half goes to the front, and that accommodates all of the roof runoff. The 100-year storm, we had 6.7 CFS for existing conditions, and for the proposed, we had a 2.1 CFS for the proposed conditions. So it's gone down drastically, mainly due to the sandy conditions that we have out there. So are there any questions on the drainage or sanitary? Any questions from commissioners?
Any questions from the commissioners?
How many spaces in the garage are you going to have?
Garage has 188.
110?
188.
Oh, okay.
188.
Right, for 145 units.
Right, okay. Thank you.
If I may, just going back to the original plan here, when you say you added 7 feet, that was actually making the sidewalk larger,
Correct.
basically.
Yeah,
Right.
they pushed it back 7 feet. They didn't make it larger.
We didn't make it larger,
but
we
back.
just shifted it.
You shifted it, but the size of the sidewalk remained the same. It just was in a different position.
Well, no, actually, the sidewalks actually increased, because now you have a sidewalk area that you can walk on.
The original proposal was right up to the sidewalk end. Now they brought it back 7 feet.
So that was important that we did make that change.
Correct. No, that was excellent.
Yep.
Just to explain the iterations, it's actually beautiful new, as you guys know, 20-foot wide DCR-owned sidewalk. And we thought with the beach there and everything, it'd be great. Most of the time, it's very easy to get permits for summer outdoor seating, ice cream, pizza,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And we were told flat out by everybody, not only in the city, but at DCR, nope, we don't allow it, they won't allow it, doesn't matter how much the city wants it. And so the city and others asked us to push the building back. We actually have an indent, so we pushed the whole building back like 7 feet, and this is indented, I think it's another 10, so we have about 17 feet, 16, 17 feet.
Of private
along the
sidewalk
front
that belongs to
of
that.
private, and that's going to be also some landscape, potted landscaped areas and whatnot. But it created more room basically in front of the area. The city wanted to create a bit of an energy along the sidewalk and along the beach and a streetscape.
Yep.
So that facilitated that.
Okay. Any other questions from
It
the
was
commissioners?
it turned out to be a simple solution
Right, you're right.
to a major problem.
Correct.
A simple solution to a major problem.
Correct.
Thank you.
Joe Laval?
Hi, I have a few questions. For my point of information, when I looked at the artist rendition, it looked as though that the building was a U shape with that middle gray area going all the way to pretty much to the back, and yet, when I look at the plan here, I see parking spaces going right across, so I'm a little
No,
confused.
that's looking down through an overlay of the
That's looking
footprint of the
through, that's
building.
kind of like a 3D
yeah.
version of it, Joe, looking down
This-
into the garage.
What you're thinking is correct. It's basically a U-shaped building, and then not at grade, where you've got the retail and then indent and hopefully a little streetscape created. But on the second floor, it's terraced, and there'll be a common area there with, again, potted plantings, some trees, and a beautiful view of the ocean right there, and a pool and whatnot. But that's not at grade. That's a level up. You won't see any parking from the street. In fact, you won't see any parking, period. They just changed the plans for the aesthetic of it, and they're actually enclosing. It made them spend more money on the fire prevention because the fire department made them go through.
So
some
basically, that inner court area is on the roof of the parking then?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you could, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
But on just that inner courtyard area, right?
And the other question, this has gone through all the other agencies in the
Yes.
city?
Yep.
Now, on the original existing plot of land, on the left-hand side, there's a roadway now.
There still is.
And that's not a public access when you're done, is that just for,
It's not our property, it's DCR land. You mean you drive into the ballpark?
so there's still a road on the left-hand
Yeah,
side?
dirt driveway, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. It's still there, it's not ours, that's DCR property. We actually granted, at the city doesn't have legal access to the sewer line and in the back there, the municipal services, there's a huge sewer main there. And although they've been driving back there, they don't have deeded access. So one of the things that we did as part of this project was to grant them, grant the city an easement, a right-of-way, so the DPW and fire can
get back
access
there.
back there. And we designed the building so I think they told us, make sure it's at least 13 feet. I think it's 17 feet, or we over-designed it. So whether it's a ladder truck or a service truck or whatever, right now, technically, they don't have a legal right to get back to their own sewer line there. And one of the things that we
With this plan, they'll
volunteered.
have an easement.
Yep,
Citywide.
yep.
Well, actually, that's why I was asking the question is, for the fire department, whether they would have access to that side of the building.
Yes, yep.
And you're telling me they would?
They
will?
would. This is the old railroad that.
Not, I'm talking about the left side again.
Over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's DCR land. They don't need it, but yeah, they can, this building you can access from all sides. And one of the things we did was to grant that access. Again, it was mainly DPW more than fire. We met the fire code for getting trucks, but they liked it too, including, by the way, going up behind the St. George and the Atlantic and whatnot too. It was a way that they could get, in behind those buildings, which you never couldn't tell. That could be important.
Now, when you have to have all that drainage going, where's the pipe that picks up that drainage and the sewer?
Oh, the sewer is in the back. That's a 12-inch pipe going into that 24-inch pipe that's coming there.
And that's one of the that pipe that's a new pipe back there, isn't it?
It's really new.
Yes.
If I recall, I think St. George might have had to extend that, or one of the other condominiums on the beach. So the volume won't be a problem?
No, I think it's 24 inch.
That's a big pipe.
28 is, excuse me, I was correct. 48, the new one? Wow. So the answer is, I know that there was
Yeah,
capacity.
the pipe will can accommodate this extra
Yeah.
drainage. Yep.
Thank you.
All set? All right, no more questions from the commissioners?
I just want to corroborate that 12-inch into a 24-inch pipe.
That's correct.
That's what's there now?
The 24 is there now. We're proposing a 12-inch to tie into it.
Okay, so you'll be adding a 12-inch,
Yes.
Yep.
which will connect to the 24-inch. Thank you.
All right, I got a couple of councilors. I want to see if they want to speak first. Ward Councilor Powers, you're looking to speak on this project?
Good afternoon, or good evening, rather. As you all know, I was opposed to this project. I was one of 3 city councilors that voted against it. I thought it was too intrusive to the neighborhood, and I think if anyone was down on Revere Beach today and looked at the traffic and the lack of parking, I think they would have to agree with me. But I'm here tonight, I just want to make sure that this project obviously is going forward. I want to make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed, and that this body does everything that needs to be done, and I'm sure you will, to protect the integrity of the homes down on the Bay Road area and that adjacent area down there, because we all know that we've had several sewer water breaks down there. It's very low down there. We've got the project coming in from the neighborhood developers in Chelsea, which is, I understand, going to the Cove site. They had originally asked for 71 units. We got it down to 51 units. So I just want to make sure that everything is done to protect the residents down there, because there's been a tremendous amount of building going on in the city. Some of it is a matter of right, some of it by special permit. And we had a meeting today in the mayor's office with traffic engineers from DCR, Department of Transportation, and our own consultants. So we're working to mitigate that traffic, but we just can't be continually adding more traffic into the city. I think it's the wrong way to go for this city. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Councilor. Councilor Rotundo?
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I want to thank Councilor Powers for correcting me. It's actually a 24-inch main with the MWRA, which is the 48-inch one, I think, from what Councilor Powers had stated to me in brief, and he would have the institutional knowledge, so I yield to that. But that said, I'm in support of this project, have been in support of this project as the chairman of zoning. Council Powers is right, we do have a significant issue regarding traffic. That's basically a systemic issue for the region, and it's an issue that emanates outside of the city of Revere that's not caused by any type of greater construction, so to speak. Speaking to the Chairman of Economic Development in the City of Revere, Mr. O'Brien, looking at the 4 studies that they've had forward, although not germane to this topic, but to address an issue of traffic, it shows that everything is emanating outside the city. We're going to have much issues as far as water and sewer, as well as conservation issues with the 13,000 units that are going to be built down at Suffolk Downs. This is just a drop in a hat. I believe and trust that Mr. Tiano and his group will do the best that they can to ensure the integrity of the water and sewer system down there. I thank them for providing the egress so that fire and water and sewer can get down in the back, which they have not been able to do. And now they're able to actually have a ladder apparatus get to the rear of the St. George, which they were unable to do up until this point. So that building was built without that type of an ability. They were only able to reach the front, and so that's a good thing for the people at the St. George, even though I know many of them are opposed to this project. So I hope that you do look affirmatively on this, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilor. Is there any proponents in the audience that want to speak for this project? Proponents for the project. That side's hearing none. That side's closed. Any opponents that want to speak against the project? Come on up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, excuse me. My name is Greg Gale. I'm a resident at 350 St. George. Okay. Yeah, my name is Greg Gigg. I'm a resident at 350 St. George, and I rise in opposition.
What is your last name, sir? I'm sorry.
Gigg, G-I-G-G.
Okay.
I rise in opposition to the project as it is presently put before us. And I know there's some nice drawings here, but I thought I'd bring something that's absolutely real, and that's a picture of the present site and its proximity to the wetlands, the waterways, and of course, America's oldest public beach, Revere Beach, of which I know we're all very proud of. I think we're all a bit at a loss with the rapid rate of development that's going on here and the lack of a master plan. And I know, commissioners here are not responsible for a master plan and how this beach should be developed. But I think we're not going in the right direction. We're not really considering the multi-uses of this beach and whether or not we are really taxing it to its limits and beyond. And I think this is a type of a project which is a project too far in terms of its density and its impact on the environment. I find it very interesting with all the talk about the environment today. There's no talk about offsets with this project, no talk about, hey, let's put some solar panels on the roof. All young people looking at electric vehicles, let's have some charging stations with this project to offset the impact to the environment. Those are the types of proposals that I would think that someone who was sensitive to the needs of the environment and our city and visitors to this area would be bringing forward, and they're not. The setback of the 7 feet, a fight on that. Nothing that was really demonstrated to me that they were sensitive to the needs of the citizens or the environment. This is just another for-profit project, nothing wrong with that, but does it really meet our needs? And that's the judgment I think that we're going to have to make. The other thing is, just one last thing was on the floodplain and, 100-year projections. I think that is entirely speculative. Everything that we see, reported by scientists says to my mind, that we don't really have an idea what the conditions are going to be in X number of years. And I think we need to build for those very adverse conditions. At the St. George, we're facing the prospect of replacing our generator, our power generator for power outages. One of the things we have to look at is how high are we going to put that generator? The prudent thing for a lot of buildings would be to put it on the roof. They're certainly doing that for a lot of downtown businesses and other urban environments. Those are the sorts of considerations we need to start talking about and making to harden our coastline. And I don't think this project is talking about that. I think it's ignoring that, kicking it down the road. And with that, I'll thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you,
Hold
sir.
it, don't go yet.
Oh,
Yep.
Hi, that's a beautiful photograph. I'm wondering how you got that.
That was my wife flying into Logan Airport and looking out the side of the plane and saying, hey, that's a beautiful
Wow,
photo.
that is. I thought it was a drone for a minute. I wish more people from the city could see that and see what a delicate little spit of land all the houses are on, with the marsh in the background and the ocean in the front. It kind of shows you just how close to the ocean we really are. It's too bad that didn't happen, that photograph didn't happen when we had the real peak tides in one of the storms,
Right.
because that back would have looked like a big swimming pool.
That's exactly right.
Unfortunately, the Conservation Commission can't address a lot of the issues that you're bringing up. I wish we could.
Yeah.
But we're a very small cog in this wheel, but you do have two councils here that are well aware of what's going on, and maybe in the future they'll come up with some kind of master plan. I was hoping Council Powers might mention about the traffic that you said you were at a meeting, and I thought maybe there's something coming down the pike that would help, because the traffic tonight was just horrendous, and it's only just a fraction of what we're going to be putting up with this summer and everything. But I thank you for coming. That was very illustrative with that photograph.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
sure, Councilor Powers, if you could.
We did have a meeting today. The mayor, two other city councilors, myself, our consultant, Van Ness, and also people from DCR and DOT. And we have right now 4 plans which we're looking at. And they're of Lower Revere Street, the Boulevard, Ocean Avenue, Oak Island Street, and that area down there. And even over to the Beachmont area, Donnelly Square over there. So we're very active on that. It's something that is going to happen, and it'll be happening very soon. And hopefully that's not going to eliminate all of the problems, but hopefully it will negate some of them and make it a little easier for people that live in the city, particularly on the ocean side of the city, a little easier for them to navigate the traffic. So that's, and that'll be put out very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor.
Yep.
If I could just, 2 points of order, Mr. Chairman, for the record. We do have electric charging stations. In fact, we not only took all of the recommended TDM measures, we volunteered additional ones. So I agree with much of the sentiment, though maybe not the conclusion. And we've, just for the record, we did that, and we're proud of that. And I hope the councilors here will also back us up that we actually volunteered, because obviously traffic's an issue down there, and we volunteered. It was requested for $25,000 towards a study that will help Councilor Rotundo and Councilor Powers, and it's a $50,000 study, traffic study, which will arm them, because it's a state road, and there's another state road up across the way, all of which is dumping traffic down on here in Revere. And we actually volunteered the full $50,000, and it wasn't required as a condition. We've offered that for the city, and again, we're proud of that, but it was because of the request of councils, both for and against the project, and they made a persuasive case that is an issue. So we're doing our part. We hope to address it.
Thank you. Any other opponents want to speak against the project?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Deborah Habig-Schneck. I've appeared before this committee several times. I own 2 condos at the St. George. We are abutters to the planned development. And the last time we had our meeting, I posed several questions because this is a conservation committee, and it's specifically to address problems that might exist because of wetlands, 100-year flood plan. Not necessarily a second floor elevated tier where there might be some trees, or a 7-foot setback, which we were told on April 25th or March 23rd would have 3 little boxwood hedges, and that would be landscaping. Now it's to increase the size of the sidewalk. I didn't finish, I'm sorry, Deborah Habig-Schneck, 350 Revere Beach Boulevard, Revere. The city council is elected by the residents, and you're supposed to plan for the future. And that's a prerequisite before you can allow any new construction. So when we research our ordinances and the background on this body's powers and duties, it's very important. And every time I have been here, at least 6 times, whether it's the conservation, our Board of Appeals, very well-educated individuals on zoning issues, variances, permits. However, certain bodies can issue permits and certain bodies can issue variances. The traffic congestion problem I have brought up, and several other people have brought up, because it falls squarely into the Revere planning for the future as a prerequisite before allowing more building. Yes, there are buildings going up. I got in my car, I left the Revere St. George, I put on my video and put it across my dashboard, and then I attempted to come down here. And I let it run for 4 minutes. As I exited, stood at the corner, stood as we hit Revere Street, and then videotaped coming all the way down past our new apartments, and the new apartments, restaurants, hotel that are going to be built before our little bridge. Today, it's our second hot day, 93, and it was 83 in March. The second hot day, you couldn't move on the beach. Everybody went to Bianchi's, and they were parking, and I videotaped as I just sat there, the people parking and spending time before any traffic could move up the boulevard, going up to Point of Pines, where we have another building going up, which has been approved, but since approval and building, just like the new building, things are beginning to change. So you do have a duty to think about the future. And so the City Council has put out RFPs for traffic study. And Chara has donated, contributed money. That's well and good. But isn't it needed to have the, no study has begun, because you have to put out your RFP and get bids. No study is completed. The City Council would have to resolve the issue and choose street access, taking away our bump outs on Revere Boulevard, Revere Beach Boulevard, doing something with Revere Street, which you just stand on, using 2 streets off to the side. I spoke on the phone, with Mr. Silva, Rick Salvo, when this case first appeared before the board, the application on a city council. And I gave him suggestions, because today you couldn't come up Ocean Ave. Those people were all exiting onto Revere Street. That was today. I have never videotaped or seen people backed up all the way to the bridge going north. It's not getting better. Oak Island could be made into a 2-way street. It used to be at one time. And the bump out at Kelly's with the monument, which is a great honor to have there, can be relocated across the street. But those things would need to be in a plan. The city would have to resolve to spend the money, no small amount, and something would need to change before we start seeing more buildings going up. And knowing how things work, because you must follow the law, this could take a year or 2, but you have a right to stay an application for building. So today my concern was, and I asked the last time, I had brought up the fact that we have wetlands behind us. I too, like my fellow unit owner, had done satellites of the parcel that's directly behind us and to, if we're facing the St. George, to the left of us. As I see it, the new development backs on the wetlands, and we have specific zoning, and we have our State Wetlands Act. And a lot of this discusses the fact that if you're going to allow, you're not allowed to allow construction on wetlands or anything that's within 100 feet of a buffer zone. So I posed these questions the last time I was here because we have a Revere conservation agent who is the person who is knowledgeable to answer any questions from a resident as to conservation areas. So we have a floodplain, we have conservation area, we have our inlet coming in between Revere and Lynn into the inland waterway, and we have swamp, and we have this area that is also going to be developed. True, the St. George abuts this also, but when the plans went in 1984, I wasn't here. So only the Revere Commission agent or someone on this board could tell us whether Revere was grandfathered in, but this is a new construction, new development. So if they're abutting the wetlands, where is the buffer zone that's to be there? If there's a variance, because there's not supposed to be anything built within 30 feet of a buffer zone, and there's a variance being granted, we have an easement in the back, and as I understand, the St. George holds an easement, has a right to an easement, which is on Revere Boulevard Street, as I understand it, directly behind the two remaining white homes that are not yet sold, right? And we, at the St. George, are concerned about that easement. Is Chara Development going to build over an easement that we hold? Because our bylaws prevent our board from reforming, renovating, moving, selling any easement that we hold. And so far on the map, no one's talked about it. You talked about the easement tonight. Chara talked about the easement on the left side. And it is true, we always have our fire department come to the front of the building because we have space for 14 to 20 visitor cars. So we have a nice setback. But we are concerned about this easement that we know exists, that we own, that cannot be transferred by our board, only by 66 2/3% of our unit owners and our first mortgagees. So we're wondering, what is Chara doing, and are they going to try and encroach upon our easement? No one has shown me on the maps. I don't see that, so maybe this board could take a look at that. My concern is the conservation area. It rained the other day, and after the Atlantica was built, and believe me, all of us who live at the St. George went over to look at the Atlantica apartments when they went on sale. Since it was built, they've got concrete foundations, slabs. We have water runoff the day or 2 days after that occurs. So if this building is built, what is going to happen as far as runoff? What kind of studies have been done? So we have drains. That's required by your building code and all the application processes. So that's nothing new. You got to put drains in. You got to put drains in for the whatever's going in there. I don't believe Bianchi's is going in there, because if they did, Chara would have given him a contract with a right of first refusal. So I don't think Bianchi's is ever going to go in there. So we're concerned. They've moved the building back, and they moved the building back. They've changed the side setbacks. So we would like to know further, what about this easement that is there, and what about our wetlands, the buffer zone, the right to build, and your obligation to make sure there's nothing that affects that wetlands area? Yes, I know you can do an order of conditions. So if you're going to do an order of conditions, what's going to go on it? And should you or the city council order a bond be issued? Because there was a bond issued for the Atlantica, because the pile driving did damage some of our building. We followed protocol, and every single unit was videotaped to see if there would be any cracks. So as building goes on next door, even if there's 8 feet of sand in the back, is a bond going to be issued? Or are you going to do that? Is city council going to do that? So that if there's damage to our building, we're going to hold Chara liable for damage we suffer. What other bonds, if there's going to be water damage, if there's going to be something that's starting to build up? So only today did the water in the back on our swamp area go back. We also have floodgates. So this is a conservation committee. I would like to know, where are the floodgates that do come in from the wetlands area and supposedly filter in to back where we are? Can you tell me that? This body should do that. So I still object. I think we have issues that affect wetlands, water conservation. Yeah, you can put in drains, but there's going to be water coming off that building, and it runs off somewhere. So is there going to be a bond? Is there going to be an order of condition that's going to address what happens if that appears after this building goes in place? And also piles. Everybody on the beach puts in piles, right? No one's talked about the actual building. It may be in the application as to how it will occur, but at any presentation I've been at, we haven't heard that. Maybe they consider it too complex for simple abutters and unit owners, but we do want to know. So there are questions unanswered, and we feel that you need to look into these before you grant this approval. Thank you very much.
Yes. Questions that she's asking are very important questions, and I think these gentlemen here can be helpful with that.
After speaking with Councilor Powers, just to refer back to the gates are to prevent water from getting into the back of the area. It is not to start infiltration from the building, number one. Number two, as far as Joe DeGangi, when he built his property there, the reason why you actually had it is because part of the bond, in order for him to construct, he had to have a seismic reader there, because he was putting piles so close to your building, because it was up to the line. There was not the same type of distance between your building and that building that's currently being there. As far as your issues regarding your plot lines, I would suggest that that's probably between, a land court decision and somewhere else, but not here. And I don't mean to say that, but that would be my understanding. As far as the water issue in critical area concern, my understanding is the MGL, having dealt with this now for the 18th time, is, and you're an attorney, you should know, is 100 feet from where you're building. So that's not 50 feet, not 30 feet, it's 100 feet from where the building stands. And I have the engineer stating this. So that issue, I don't know, just to help you remedy that. But I would say right now, to be quite honest with you, God forbid you have a fire in the back, you're going to lose a life, because whoever planted that building, the St. George, did a poor job of it. Well, you got no access in the back, ma'am. I've been there as an EMT. I'm telling you, you don't.
Can you guys answer some of these questions as far as the 100 feet and all that stuff, Rich?
It's Mary Rimmer who went through the delineation. I don't know if we have the map.
Sure. A few months ago.
Can you just give me a name and address?
Sure,
for the
it's
record,
Mary
please?
Rimmer, Environmental Consulting. And a few months ago, we filed what's called an abbreviated Notice of Resource Area Delineation, so that the Conservation Commission could establish and confirm what wetland resources were on the property and that required protection, so that we would have that information when a notice of intent was filed. Now you have your notice of intent. The determination was that your project site is obviously on a barrier beach, but we have some salt marsh to the rear of the property. This is the 100-foot buffer zone leading to the salt marsh right here.
Yeah, that green line is the buffer zone.
Salt marsh. So the property is outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to the salt marsh. It is within Barrier Beach, which is a resource. We determined that it's not a coastal dune. And there is land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is the 100-year flood elevation, which extends to elevation 11 on the project site. So in terms of each wetland resource has particular performance standards that need to be adhered to as part of the construction. We're outside of the buffer zone for salt marsh, and again, the buffer zone, the 100-foot buffer zone, is the area that you have jurisdiction over. It's not a no-build zone. It's the area that is required for an applicant has to seek permission from the Conservation Commission, as you know, to work within a 100-foot buffer zone. Beyond that, you have no jurisdiction. But in this particular site, you know, because we're on a barrier beach and we're in land subject to coastal storm flow, which we do have those performance standards to deal with as well. Unfortunately, there aren't any specific performance standards right now under the regulations for land subject to coastal storm flowage. There are building code requirements for FEMA flood zones, and that the applicant is required to comply with. But there's no specific performance standard for that resource. So, you have any other questions about that?
Anyone have any questions? Any other opponents? Do I have opponents? Yeah, I did proponents, opponents.
Hi, my name is Joan Linzillo-Hesse. I'm a resident of the St. George. I'm not going to reiterate my opposition. Attorney Schneck really covered it in great detail. We're just concerned that, and we know that it's gone beyond, because this is the last step in the approval process. And so it has already gone beyond the special permitting, and we have some reservations that the loophole that they claim that they found in the city ordinances, that they no longer had to go to the Board of Appeal for their setbacks and parking variances and things like that. They said that that's all covered in the special permit. We have some doubts about that, and we're just concerned that that the developer is going to come back and, because they left it up, they withdrew without prejudice to come back and seek additional development on that site, make it bigger, taller, more dense, and we're concerned about that.
Thank you. Any other opponents? Do I have a will of the commission, what we'd like to do here, to issue or deny? What's the will of the commission?
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak? If not, I'll make a motion that we close the hearing.
I'll second it.
All right, what's the will of the commission? What's the will of the commission to make a motion to either approve or deny the order of conditions?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second.
All right, guys, your order of conditions has been approved. Give me a few days and I'll get you guys a copy of the original. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for ANRAD DEP File 0610710, CBW Lending LLC 190 VFW Parkway. You actually got to put it on that side so the camera can see it, because it's just that one camera on that side. Yeah, if you guys can face that camera right there, it'll be great. Name and address for the record, please.
Ann McMenamy from Hancock Associates. I'm representing the applicant, CWB Lending LLC. We're starting with the ANRAD, the abbreviated Notice of Resource Area Delineation. There are several resource areas on this developed property that have been delineated and surveyed and shown on the plan. The main feature, of course, is the Eastern County Ditch, running through the middle of the site here. We delineated both a narrow fringe of bordering vegetated wetland as well as the top bank for the Eastern County Ditch. There's also another degraded wetland area, vegetated wetland area right over here that was delineated. The remainder of the site, we're looking at bordering land subject to flooding and land subject to coastal storm flowage, which my colleague, Joe Pesnola, will give a presentation on that. But before I move away, I appreciated the commission's site walk on Saturday, taking a look at the jurisdictional areas, and I'm available to answer any questions that there may be before we get into the floodplain discussion.
Any commissioners have any questions?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
This isn't a question, but along with Commissioner Melanson, I walked the site, and what you're proposing is very limited. As we went at the site, it's removing some of the vegetation to the same degree that was already done up until the point that DEP stopped you, and that's the scope of this.
Well, that's the next one on the
That's the next
agenda
one.
for the
This is for
same.
ANRAD to determine
The extent of
Resource area
jurisdiction and
delineation.
type, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner.
That's okay, we'll be there in a minute. Okay.
Any other questions? Any proponents want to speak about this? Counselor, you got any? Counselor Rotundo?
Anything that they can do to expedite the issues down there would
I think
be,
we all have the same,
you know, exactly. And I think the city needs to keep up with dealing with the Phragmites and the other issues down at the Eastern County Ditch. To be quite honest with you, they need to probably dredge that whole area, just like with the Town Line Brook, in
Yeah.
order to help facilitate less flooding in that area, which is predominantly the issue. Thank you.
Councilor Powers, you want to speak on this? We're talking about Wonderland right now, sir, and the area resource delineation.
Actually, as you know, I was down there Saturday morning. We had a site visit, yourself and Commissioner Lavelle. And right now, what is going on down there is others may not know, we're doing an asbestos project, which is going to take probably 7 to 8 weeks, I believe, maybe a little less. And DEP, we had a meeting 2 weeks ago in Wilmington at DEP, and they've been working very diligently with the owners and everyone involved there. And once the abatement is done, the asbestos abatement, within a couple of weeks after that, large machines will come in and demolish the grandstand and the clubhouse, and Wonderland at that point will be a history. I know there's a serious water problem down there. I know that the head wall at the ditch, as I pointed out the other day, is completely blocked, and that's something that has to be corrected. We're going to be starting probably in the fall, cleaning the Eastern County Ditch. It's going to be costly. I believe there's $1 million set aside to do that. As you know, there is no more side casting with debris taken out of the ditches, so it has to be earmarked, transported, and taken to a place. But whatever we're looking to do down there, I know it'll be a positive thing, and I support it 100%.
Thank you,
very
Counselor.
much.
Any other proponents want to speak on this? Any opponents want to speak?
I'll just add before I pass this over to my colleague that the erosion controls had all been refreshed on the site
Yeah,
as in the
I was
last
there,
couple of
yeah.
weeks, which it needed to be after the long winter. So the straw wattles as well as the silt sacks and 2 catch basins.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Joe Pesnola from Hancock Associates. What we're doing here tonight with the setting of the resource areas is looking forward towards the redevelopment of the park. We understand the local flooding that happens down there and everywhere in the area surrounding the Eastern County Ditch. And working with the state and your commission over the years on the Waterfront Square project and the Eastern County Ditch Mitigation project, which we were involved with, or are involved with also, it came to light that we kind of needed to treat the Eastern County Ditch like a more of an inland floodplain. Right now we talk about the land subject to coastal storm flowage, and that's at elevation 11 or 12. This site's at elevation 3 and 4, so that's 9 feet of water. And that's not the problem. I mean, that would be a problem, obviously, if it happened, but that's when the ocean comes in, and there's not a lot we can do about that. But what happens time and time again in this neighborhood is the smaller floods, which are very problematic and very troubling and very costly for the residents. And that's at some elevation in between 3, 4 and that 12. It's when the Eastern County Ditch spills its bank and goes out into the neighborhoods. So what we've done here at the suggestion of DEP is a little unorthodox in that we're asking you to recognize the land subject to coastal storm flowage as a resource area. And as was spoken on the earlier project, there are no performance standards with regards to doing work in that resource area. But we're also asking you to look at this site based on what's known as bordering land subject to flooding, which is an inland floodplain. And we've done a flood study to look at what happens in those inland storms, not the coastal storms. And what happens when that Eastern County Ditch spills its banks, and what is the available volume of this site in particular for that to hold the floodwaters. Because in future development, if we interrupt that ability of that land to hold water, then we can adversely affect the downstream abutters, the other people in the area. So we want to establish that elevation. And then moving forward, when we do get to redevelopment, we'll be sensitive to that elevation and what we do within that range from the existing ground, 3 or 4, up to this elevation that we've established.
Interrupting, but when you're talking about the elevation, currently is 3 to 4 feet,
It's above sea level.
and you want to go to 12?
No. What I'm saying is the floodplain, we're not proposing to do anything here. The coastal floodplain is elevation 12. So when we talk about the ocean flood, the coastal flood, the land subject to coastal storm flowage, that water elevation is elevation 12. So in that flooding event, there'd be 9 feet of water on the site. 9 feet of water in the rear.
Right now, with no development in, it's 3 or 4 feet of elevation. If there's
Okay.
ever future development, it has to be at 12 feet, which would be
That's
that.
what I wanted
Yep.
to clear up.
Right. So what we've done is we've looked at when it rains, the area that flows down to Wonderland. And it's an area that goes all the way from the commuter rail tracks to 1A, and to the north, Revere Street, and to the south, all the way to Beach Street. So it's a large area. It's 122 acres that's mostly impervious. And that all gets down to the Wonderland area. And so that's the area that's shown in this map. And that was our study area. So we do a model and figure out when it rains in that 100-year flood, how much water is coming down there, and then what happens to the site. And this is just a helpful graphic that shows you the elevations on the Wonderland site. The different colors are the different elevations. So down by the ditch, we're at elevation 3, And then yellow is elevation 4, orange is elevation 5, red is elevation 6. So it's a big bowl. And it provides quite a bit of flood storage when those flooding events happen. So what we did is we took all that water from the 122 acres and we brought it down, put it in this site and said, what is that elevation? And it came out to be 5.3. So we would like this commission, through the grant of the Order of Resource Area Delineation, to codify that 5.3. And then when we do come in future, for a future development, that'll be the benchmark. That'll be what we need to preserve. We need to preserve the amount of volume on site to hold water between the existing elevation and 5.3. So we have to be conscious of that when we put structure down and when we put fill in. So it's going to be a site that's developed very much like some of the other sites with podiums and elevated structures. But we still got to worry about that structure and the stairwells and the lobbies and the actual structure that lands. And we need to get roadways up into that from 1A. So that's what we've proposed here, and that's what we're asking the commission to do as part of this Order of Resource Area Delineation.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions from the commissioners? I have a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close it.
I'd like to ask a question.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Could you put that chart up again?
The colored one?
You're asking us to accept a 5-foot delineation for the entire area, is that correct?
To establish an elevation of 5.3 above sea level as the floodplain elevation associated with the Eastern County Ditch.
Well, through the chair, I'm not sure if we can do that in the first place. I don't know if we have the power to do something like
No,
that.
certainly you do. If in other instances, sometimes FEMA doesn't study a floodplain and they don't assign an elevation to it, but they map it and they say, here's an elevation. And in 310 CMR 10, the wetlands regulations, what it says that your charge is in those instances is to compel the applicant to establish that elevation through best available information or through studies. So that's all we're doing here is we're providing a study and we're asking the commission through issuance of the ORAD to accept that study and accept that elevation. So it's very similar to those circumstances. But the nuance here is that's normally assigned to a river and a riverine style floodplain. In this instance, DEP tends to, they ignore situations like this because the land subject to coastal storm flowage is the worst case. It's elevation 12 and it's up here. And it kind of ignores the fact that there are these localized flooding events, these non-coastal storms, and these situations where the Eastern County Ditch is just acting like a river and spilling its banks too often and impacting the residents there. So we're trying to establish a baseline, a benchmark to then utilize when we're doing that future development. So it's just it's a tool, and I firmly believe
Sure.
it's within your power.
Joe, all we're doing is determining a flood line, like an average flood line for the property. When they come in the future here for development, they can't go against what the regulations are, you know?
Well, I'm wondering if we're making it easier for them to fill lower areas in the 3 and 4 foot range, the yellow and the orange,
Nope.
to that 5-foot level.
No, because as discussed in the earlier project, if we were merely to call this land subject to coastal storm flowage, there are no performance standards. There's no compensatory volume. There's no requirements. By calling this a BLSF, in addition to a land subject to coastal storm flowage, we are giving you power because we're introducing performance standards under the wetlands regulations that are assigned to that bordering land subject to flooding. So now we have to provide foot-by-foot compensatory storage for any impact at those lower elevations from 0 up to 5.3. So it makes it harder for us. But the issue with Waterfront Square, for example, is DEP got involved during the MEPA process and defined it loosely. And it was very difficult for people to understand. And it drove the whole Eastern County Ditch Mitigation piece of the Waterfront Square project, which really didn't make sense and do what it needed to do. And that's why, as Councilor Powers said, the $1.1 million from that may now be going to a better idea, which is cleaning out the Eastern County ditch, dredging it, lowering it, getting it working again, and taking those castings that are contaminated and trucking them to the appropriate sites. So this is just kind of helping everyone define the rules, set the parameters, give you performance standards to assign in the future, so that we all know with confidence, and you as commissioners know, in acting on a future proposal, that here's the rules. They're doing what they're following those rules, and and protecting the neighborhood. Without that, we're kind of running loose and fast without rules.
And what makes you think DEP wouldn't supersede our orders?
I've discussed this exact approach with Rachel Freed, the section chief of the Northeast region. And she feels that it's right and proper, and that our approach, our conservative approach, is a good one, and supports it. So we'll find out if you issue the ORAD and they step in, but I'm not anticipating that. I think the bigger challenge will be when we have something to present to this commission and the rest of the city for the redevelopment of this site. What are the details, and how is the mitigation going to happen, and how is the environment and the neighborhood and all of that protected? And all we're doing tonight is trying to set the ground rules for that.
Okay. Commissioner Raponi?
According to what you just spoke about, it all comes down to a study, a test, a feasibility study in order to differentiate between coastal storms and normal storms. So what you're really doing is studying the impacts of different types of storms.
Exactly.
And it's going to benefit the entire project once you find what the end result is.
Yep. No, it definitely is, because it's providing certainty. One of the problems with getting people interested in redeveloping this site is uncertainty, especially surrounding the flooding issue. So this is providing some certainty, some ground rules, so that people that are showing interest in redeveloping it can understand what are the rules that I'm going to have to apply. What will I have to do to redevelop this and prove to the city that it's not going to be impactful to the...
You won't know the rules until the study's completed.
No, we've done the study.
Oh, you
They've
have.
done it already.
And that's what we're presenting tonight, with regards to setting that elevation.
So basically, we're just going to order it. We're
So
going to,
the DEP has been involved and authorized you to do all this? You've done your homework.
We've done our homework. Yes.
Thank you.
so basically, we're just going to give them a resource, an ORAD, to determine a baseline for their future development that's going to happen at that property. So do I have a motion to close out the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue the ORAD?
I'll make a motion to do so.
Okay, Ann Raponi. I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All set, thank you. I'll get the copy of this to you as soon as possible, within the week or so.
Thank you. Will you send it to the Danvers address that I filed it under?
Yes, whatever address it's
We're
under,
in two
yeah.
different offices.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so next is public meeting RDA CBW Lending LLC 190 VFW Parkway Vegetation Management.
Good
Name
evening.
and address again for the record.
Yes, Ann McMenemy, Hancock Associates, 185 Center Street, Danvers, Mass. At the site walk on Saturday, we took a look at the former dog track, and I'm sorry, this is only an 11 by 17, and I did hand out copies, and I thought I had the copies with me again tonight to give to everybody, so I apologize for the distance to see this. But all we're looking at is the areas that are colored in green, and those are areas that we're proposing to remove the vegetation really for safety, security on the property, to be able to have, folks not to be able to hide in the vegetation. The triangle corner right here is 2 mature trees right at the corner of 2 oaks. Within the track is a mix of a bunch of different things, native and a lot of Phragmites and multiflora rose and willow and things like that. The area is located just outside the 100-foot buffer zone from the Eastern County Ditch. From this area, it comes right up to the top of the track. So there's no wetland jurisdiction present within the areas that we're showing that we'd like to clear within the track. We took a look at the left side of the track that was cleared without the requirement for a permit last summer. And I don't believe there were trees growing there either. There may have been large saplings, but it appears that everything was just cut to the ground, so we're not anticipating any stumping or any ground disturbing activities in that area. We also talked about during the site walk on Saturday that it's going to grow back. So there's going to need to be ongoing maintenance. Now, the determination of applicability will be valid for 3 years. So we just wanted to have the commission understand that there may be future cutting in both of these same areas going forward to maintain the security lines of sight. But again, they're both outside of wetlands jurisdiction, just outside for the green area and completely outside for the area that was done last summer.
Okay, thank you. For commissioners, I know Joe was with us, Ann and Toby. So last year, Andy gave permission. This is just literally for the dog track. So there's no drainage anywhere else, just literally the dog track. Andy gave them permission to do half of the dog track last year. They're looking for permission to do the rest of the middle, the center of the dog track this year. And our one concern was, in a year from now, when it grows back, it still needs to be maintained. And they said they would come up with a plan for that, to keep it maintained for the next 3 years. So that's what we're looking to do, just come up with a negative determination so they can chop down the rest of that stuff with no stumping involved.
That's right, so acknowledging that it's not within wetland jurisdiction, and
Yep.
therefore that we would need to proceed to a further filing of a
Correct.
notice
So
of intent.
do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Ann. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joe. Okay. All right, same thing. Thank you very much. I'll
Okay.
get you a copy of this
Thank you.
within the week or so. All right, so next we have continued public hearing. A notice of intent, DEP file number 06107, I know I don't have the whole number, XX, but Lehigh Hospitality LLC, 405 American Legion Highway, demolition of existing car wash and construction of a 5-story, 110-room hotel and 87 parking spaces. Anybody here for that? So I know you guys made a presentation last month. We just needed a copy of a report, a Phase 2 report, to show if there was any contamination, which we've received, and we've determined there is no contamination in the property. So you can definitely talk about it, introduce yourself, and we'll make a determination.
For the record, my name is Scott Rogers, JK Holmgren Engineering, 1024 Pearl Street in Brockton. As you mentioned, we were here in April to present the project to you. At that point, the request was made for a Phase 1. We did submit a Phase 2, which indicated that the ground water and soil samples are clean in the area. I do have a file number that's been issued by DEP 67-0711 as well. Just for a little bit of clarification, the plans that you have before you called for a 110-room hotel. That's been reduced down to 104.
Okay.
And likewise, there was 87 parking spaces proposed under the old plan, which has been reduced down to 83 spaces.
So we're going to 104 and 83.
Yep.
Okay.
And we did meet with the Site Plan Review Committee for a first meeting. A lot of the comments they had regarding water lines, fire truck turning movements, and some landscaping issues, which we're working on currently. I guess that's basically it. I'll just answer questions if you have any.
Yeah, may I ask why the change in the number of units?
Essentially, what it came down to was we were shooting for 110 rooms, and when they started getting into more of the floor planning, putting in stairwells and utility rooms, they dropped off a few rooms here and there.
Any other questions? No? Joe? Do we have a,
Make a motion to close the
Make a
hearing?
motion to close out the hearing. Joe? I have a second.
I'll second it.
Do I have a motion to issue the order of conditions?
I'll make a motion to
for
that.
Joe, first motion, Ann, I'll put you a second.
Fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. We'll get you a copy of this within a week or so.
Thank you.
All right. So next we have public meeting, RDA 64 VWS owner LLC, 660, 674 Ocean Avenue. Construct a service alley and crushed stone turnaround within 100 feet of the buffer zone from the Eastern County ditch. You again. Name and address.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, Joe Pesnola from Hancock Associates, representing 64 VWS owner LLC, otherwise known as Westbrook Properties. They're the new owner of the Vanguard at 660, 674 Ocean Avenue. The original plan for the Vanguard, as far as moving people in, was to park the vans and the trucks on the Ocean Ave and move people in that way. That's not working out for them too much. In the back of the building, there's a 10-foot strip property line from the property line to the blue line right-of-way, the vacant portion of the blue line right-of-way. Back there, we just kind of put a gravel access drive for maintenance of the back of the building. But there is on each of the buildings a stairwell that has a door that goes right out onto that alley. So they looked into the possibility of getting a service alley back there. It's not wide enough, so they approached the MBTA, and the MBTA was actually amenable to them paving a little bit on their property on the right-of-way in exchange for a T turnaround. Or some way to get their vehicles, because the T doesn't have any access to that section of the right-of-way. It's vacant. It's between Revere Street and the end of the active blue line. But MBTA owns it and would like to have access, so they're granting them an access between the two buildings and then out to that back area. And then if MBTA needed to get back there and turn around, they could do it. So, as was shown on the plan, the blue line is the Eastern County ditch. The Inland Bank is the only resource area in this area. There's no BVW. The red line is the buffer zone. And what we're proposing to do is pave a 15-foot strip. Portion of it would be on the Vanguard property, and a portion on the MBTA. That main longitudinal strip would be paved, and the turnaround would be crushed stone. The area of proposed pavement within the wetland buffer is about 3,600 square feet. We looked at the original drainage calculations that we had done for the Vanguard project, rolled in this additional impervious, and still met the pre to post standards. We had put in, fortuitously, drains along that area that go down into an infiltration trench along the back. So we don't have to change any grades back there. So there's no issue with the floodplain stuff. So there's no decrease in the volume out there. And the drains can function just as they do today with that paved surface. And they'll be able to more easily get the residents in on moving day. So we think where it's such a small area, less than 5,000 square feet, and it's so far away within the buffer zone that it's ripe for a negative determination of applicability.
Have any questions from the commissioners?
Could you point out on that diagram where the station is? Is it?
No, the station's way down here. So Vanguard's the last building, just before you get to Revere Street. The smaller building's right on Revere, and then the bigger building is down. Everything behind Vanguard is just vacant track. It's when you get down to about 650 Ocean, to the north side of the 650 Ocean site, or Ocean 650, is where that perpendicular fence is, where the end of the runout is, where they store the Blue Line cars, and that's the end of the active rail. And then the station is down even further.
The track goes past the station. There's a,
Right, the track goes past the station, and then there's...
and that doesn't show on the diagram either?
It doesn't go up this far.
Oh.
No,
See, and I thought it had.
no, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion, motion to grant a negative determination of applicability?
I'll make a motion.
Ian? Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you
All
very much.
set. I'll get to this within a week or so, Joe. All right, last public hearing, notice of intent, DEP file 0610715, St. Jean's Credit Union, 171 VFW Parkway, to construct a 4,500 square foot retail bank with drive-through ATM and teller. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
The motion.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Toby Cassidy. All right, sir, name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Daniel Pageon. I'm from VHB. My address is 32 Jason Street in Arlington, Massachusetts. I'm here representing St. Jean's Credit Union tonight. This is a little loud. St. Jean's proposes to build a new 4,500 square foot building in the middle of the Wonderland parking lot. The Wonderland Marketplace. The Wonderland Marketplace was built in the 1990s. VHB did that permitting then, nearly 30 years ago. It's about a 10-acre property. About 6 acres of that is currently pavement. I think you're all familiar with it. St. Jean's Credit Union wants to carve out a small piece of that parking lot and create a new bank building. It's 4,500 square feet of building. There's about a 1,500 square foot reduction in pavement, and there's a net reduction in impervious, a 1,500 square foot reduction in impervious, and there's about a 12,000 square foot overall impact for the project. The project is located in land subject to coastal storm flowage, the same land subject to coastal storm flowage that the prior consultant was talking about. The base flood elevation at this site is elevation 12, and that's a coastal storm. The proposed finished floor elevation for the bank building is elevation 8. So while we're right across the street from the Wonderland Marketplace, that gentleman calculated the inland floodplain to be about 5.3. That's a very interesting exercise. Our building will still be nearly 3 feet above that. We have also consulted with DEP. We have also thought about the floodplain issues. I have with me tonight Jake San Antonio, and Joe Cottagio. Jake is from VHB, and we did a very detailed flood analysis for this site. And we, not me, Jake and his team, the engineering team, repeated the FEMA flood study, the transect study for the property. And they were able to demonstrate, and the summary of this information is in the notice of intent. The result of the study indicated that the proposed building, while it will be located in the floodplain, in fact, the finished floor will be 4 feet below the base flood elevation in that 100-year storm. The building will not result in any increase in flood stage or velocity or the lateral extent of the floodplain in the area. And that's because it's a coastal storm. They repeated the FEMA flood study for this particular section, this transect, and were able to demonstrate that. We provided that information to DEP because we just wanted to get ahead of the conversation. And we provided that to them, and they had no objection to the project. They've issued a DEP file number. And we look forward to the commission issuing an order of conditions to approve that. As I said, the project is about two 2,250 square foot retail facilities. One is a bank, one will be retail. There's a net reduction in impervious, a net reduction in pavement. We're not proposing any new stormwater features. During the construction phase, we will install silt sacks in the existing catch basins in order to protect water quality. There's a small reduction in impervious. We think it's a win-win, and it's in the middle of a parking lot. So,
What part of the parking lot is it going to be compared to the building, compared to the buildings that are there now?
so that's all shown in your notice of intent. It's right about here. This is the Wonderland Marketplace.
That's it now? Okay.
This is as it exists today. Wonderland Dog Track is over here. VFW Parkway. This is the 6-acre parking lot. It's going to be right about here.
Okay.
Okay. Print this out so we should show it to you. This is very simple site design. One building footprint, some sidewalks and landscaping around it. There'll be a drive-through here, so there's a little bit of pavement that comes up here and it becomes concrete. And there's a little bit of reorientation of parking in front so we can provide handicap spaces. It takes stormwater runoff that would normally go to pavement and replaces it with clean building runoff. And the runoff will be, the runoff from the building will be connected by a 6-inch PVC pipe to the existing stormwater system.
No intentions of another entrance or exit from VFW Parkway? We're staying with those two entrances that are there now? Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Yes.
Sure.
The drainage now goes to the highway. Is that what you just indicated?
That's correct. I can go back to the Wonderland Marketplace survey. Currently, the parking lot has a series of catch basins with subs and hoods. It collects into a trunk line and gets out to VFW Parkway. There's a second one that runs along here, also connects to VFW Parkway's drainage system. The building will be located right in here. Some of the water will go to these catch basins, some will go to these catch basins, and again, it will flow through the existing system. And there will be a little bit less of it because there'll be some landscaping instead of pavement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sounds like this gentleman did his homework. He went to the DEP before he got started. Smart move.
Do I have a motion to close? Actually, do I have any proponents that want to speak for this project? Do you guys want to speak at all? Are we all set? I think we're all set. Yeah. Any opponents that want to speak against this project? Do I have a motion to close out the public hearing?
Make motion.
All right, Toby, and then Ann seconded. All right, do I have a motion to issue the order of conditions?
I'll make that motion.
Ann is making a motion. First, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You're
Thank
all
you,
set.
sir.
We'll get you a copy of this within a week or so.
Thank you very much,
Alrighty.
gentlemen. Ma'am.
And that is it. Do I have a motion to close out the meeting?
I'll make the motion.
Toby,
I'll-
do I have a second? Ann
I'll
seconds it.
second it.
That's it. Thank you.